Thanks everyone for joining us. This is our 40th session of Knowledge
Ooh.
Series. This is an amazing milestone for us, and we're so excited to actually have 40 sessions, and we would be able, to run this consistently for you. We are pleased that we have today KYC 2020 to be our sponsor of this session. And I want to tell you a bit about who we are. If the TCA is something new to you and you haven't heard about us before, first of all, my name is Susan Ismaili. I'm the founder of TCAE, and as many of you might know, that education and sharing information is a passion of mine. So I'm really happy that many of our industry experts, along with many of the companies around the world as well, they are supporting us through this journey. I started TCAE and in October 2019, and we have been trying to connect, empower, and educate many of the professionals in the compliance and AML industry. And some of the things that we are offering is the knowledge series session that you are all in, and this is our 40th session. And we offer as well, study groups for all the CAMs and CFCS enthusiasts who wants to get their certificate. We give a mentorship and support. As well as that, we started a new arm for TCA, which is our talent hub, where we are trying to find talented individuals and connect them with their dream jobs. So this is also a very exciting initiative that we have started a couple of months ago, and we can see how exciting that is every day. And also for our crypto enthusiasts, we have started a partnership with Chainalysis, where we're offering some of their courses which are not really available to everyone. Um, and access to it can be a bit difficult. So we are trying our best, to work on sharing education, sharing knowledge as much as we can. Make sure that you follow us on LinkedIn and visit our website. We have so many great opportunities, and as well, we have started our membership and exclusive community platform, which are exclusive to our members. So feel free, uh, to to just visit there and see and explore. We have started to have, I think, more than 40 people right now on the community platform, and the chats and the communication is going awesomely well. So feel free, to join there, and we would be exciting to have you there. So I want to pass over the floor to the moderator of the session. I'm not the moderator for the session. Stephen is. He's our best moderator. So I will pass the floor to Stephen to take on the session and give you a bit more background about what we are going to talk today, and also introduce the rest of the amazing panel that we have. So Stephen, here you go.
Thanks so much, Susan, and congratulations. I think this is a huge milestone. I don't believe there's any other organization of your size with just you and several volunteers that have been able to put out so many sessions during the pandemic. And you've given such a great platform for speakers to connect with the community. And I don't think there's anyone that bridges the gap better, from senior managers, CAMLOs, to people just starting in the industry, than you and TCA have done over the last year, and what it feels like is almost a half. But this is one of those subjects. The false positive conundrum is one of those things. Any AML investigator, any KYC person, these are the solutions. These are the answers that we really need help with, because I believe this takes up most of our administrative time for most of the compliance industry. So what we're actually going to do is Joseph is actually going to lead us through, like, what is this problem? And I think lots of you will understand the presentation, because it's our day-to-day when we're searching names, and how do we identify, are these positive matches? Are these people that should be in, that we should administer enhanced due diligence? So I'm going to turn it over to Joseph. He's going to give a presentation, and then we're going to go into the panel discussion where Rajeev, Karen, and Joseph and myself will get deep down in what is the problem, and most importantly, is there a solution that can help us and save time and money for most of our AML and compliance audience today? Joseph, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much, Susan, for having me. Thank you, Creen and Rajeev, for being on the panel. I'm honored to be here today to talk to you all today. And I'm just going to jump into the presentation, talk a little bit about some of the conundrums, and then we're going to, I guess, dive into the panel. So, oops. So most AML regimes focus on exact match searching, and that's okay for industries that are probably small to medium-sized entities because they're not hugely a lot of huge volume. The challenge becomes when you start becoming a big bank and enterprise type of institution. They're getting forced by regulators to actually implement fuzzy logic. So this is coming for the small and medium-sized entities. The big ones are already used to it, and it's still a problem. It's still a challenge. So what are the challenges? Some of them are really related to name iterations and variants, where you have like John, Jon, and I'll show you some examples. Um, and then you have typos, where somebody types in something wrong, or the list itself has something wrong, or there's a phonetic name, a name that could have different variations and could be spelled differently. And then the other major challenge, which is entity versus individuals. And I think Karen, we're gonna talk about this a little bit later, right? Um, to catch these though, most of the institutions that have to do it are putting in false or fuzzy logic searching. So what are some examples? Name iterations and variants. You can take the word John, and you can see that in many languages it's spelled differently. And as well on sanctions lists. So when somebody comes from one country to another with different language changes, they may change their name to the name of that country. And this is a challenge. Even the regulator down in the US, the Department of Treasury, has basically published some guidance on that. And they're basically saying sanction screening software are faults, are filter faults. And one of the things you can see there I've highlighted is they do not account for alternative spelling, right? So even the regulator has recognized that the search screening and exact match searching is no longer good enough. Um, and and this is even their challenge too. People are typing these things in, human error, right? So they may even type in the name wrong. And so if you don't have a fuzzy logic search screening tool and you're just using an exact match, you're going to miss the typos as well. And then the other thing is phonetic matching. You can see here that the word Washington has like 3,900 different deviations. And if you use a certain sound X, you can get down to 9. But then when you really want to get to it is you want to get down to that 4. So fuzzy logic is probably going to give you all those 3,900 when you actually do the searching, or maybe even the 9. But you really need to get down to the close names, the ones that are dealing with, because you're right, Stephen. People are spending a lot of time filtering out fuzzy when they use it and when they're forced to use it. So I'd like to give an example. This was pretty neat. We did it the other day. So we're going to use Karen Creen, the Chief Compliance Officer, Bank of China. We're going to
We
use her.
really hope that it's fine, right? It
Yeah,
should
we
be
really do.
fine.
So we're gonna use fuzzy logic. We're gonna select all the lists and we're gonna search. And this is typical of pretty much every system out there when you're looking at fuzzy. And we'll talk about fine tuning a little bit later. Oops, I did the wrong one first. Sorry. I was going to do smart scan. All right, so this is a standard search engine. Most search engines use things like Elasticsearch or some form of search technology. And then in the background, oops, oh my goodness, I'm a little nervous today, I guess. Okay. So in this case, Karen Creen came up with 200 fuzzy hits. Now imagine
Oh
if you're a
no.
compliance person and you have to go, oh my God, how do I filter this, right? So what we've done is a lot of systems are starting to look at artificial intelligence to screen those out. And why is that important? Well, you need to be able to replicate what humans do to a certain degree. So what we've done here is we've used artificial intelligence. It comes back as a fail.
Oh
And if
no,
we
I still failed.
You still failed. Let's find out why. So let's take a look at the PDF, and you'll see in here that um, Karen Creen, there was lots of hits. I'll go back to that in a second, but it came back and said, "Oh, it's Jaren Creole, right?" But there's no other hits, so that's probably the closest you're going to get to something where there's a name deviation, potentially a spelling mistake. And we found this out by accident the other day when we were actually just going through it. So she's not the same person. But if you had that name in a sanctions list or a PEP list or something else, and you didn't catch this, the regulator is most likely going to say you better start looking at fuzzy logic, right? So it's happening more and more. And what else? The other key pieces that you want when you're doing this, because you've got AI, you need to prove to the regulator that the AI is actually working. So you need some sort of system that shows you what did you do, what are the different checks you're doing, how many lists are you checking, what are the variations of those lists, what are some of the high level rules, even the name variations. If you see here, we've taken all the different variations, and the same with the last name. And so you got to be able to prove that. You can't just say, I'm using fuzzy logic and done. Just like a couple of weeks ago, I think Laura was talking about testing your systems. This is one of those things you need to be testing constantly because those spelling mistakes happen a lot. I've seen it happen on the CIA list. I've seen it happen on the OFAC list. And we also saw the government saying the same thing. I've seen it happen on PEP list. Justin Trudeau was spelled Justine. uh, it's really human error that comes into play. So those are the kind of things you need to look for when you're doing that kind of stuff. Um, and I think that's about it for me, Steve.
That's great, Joseph. I think we all needed to see it. Some of the audience members are probably sweating right now, just having nightmares of seeing that on a daily basis. But let's go through the panel. Joseph, tell us who you are, where you work, and tell us one thing you'd be doing if you weren't spending hours doing fuzzy name screening.
So my name is Joseph Iuso. I'm a co-founder and business development lead, and I take care of the functions as related to trying to um, build the business with regard to sales and some of the marketing, although I don't do a lot of it. And also, I'm the CAMLO for KYC 2020, and I take care of looking at the different variances and things like that, so that when it does go up to the public, it's a product that I would be happy with. I'm also chief compliance officer for BitBuy and payment source. So I do this as a daily thing. And I've seen different systems and different ways that other systems do it. And I'm very proud of what we've done. I think we've accomplished a lot in a small amount of time. And we still got a lot of way to go, but we're trying to really solve the problem of the amount of time people are wasting on screening. I see it today with WorldCheck, RDC, all kinds of stuff. And I just tell my team we have to trudge through it. It's the only way to deal with it.
Amazing, amazing. Now we're gonna Karen Creen. Let us know who you are, where you work, and what you would be doing if you didn't have to spend so much time doing fuzzy logic name screening.
Well, apparently I might be on the no-fly list, but I'm the CAMLO and Senior Compliance Manager at Bank of China Toronto branch, which is a Schedule 3 bank in Canada, which means that we are a foreign bank branch and licensed to do commercial banking. I work really closely with our friends at our Schedule 2, which is retail banking. So I have 17, 18 years in the industry now. It's getting fuzzier as time goes on. And experience in both commercial and retail banking spaces. Have spent my whole career in compliance, and this is kind of really what I love doing and love looking at. If I could save time off of clearing things for fuzzy logic, where we get, half name hits and partial hits that need to be looked at by a human being, I'd probably be spending more time tuning other systems since I'm in charge of a bunch of systems, regulatory compliance management, doing all those updates, making sure those systems are working well. But it would be uh, it would definitely save on the drudge work that I don't think anyone really enjoys for any reason, right? Like, so
Agreed.
saving the drudge work.
Agreed. I feel like we're going to be using, like, we're going to be milking the word fuzzy today, but I'm okay with that. Rajeev, let us know who you are, what you do, where you work, and what would you be doing if you weren't helping people get through this fuzzy logic conundrum?
Thanks, Stephen. And by the way, Susan, before I answer that, I want to say thanks to you. This is pretty impressive. I mean, for a Saturday, people, you know, being involved in a knowledge series session, that's fantastic. So, Stephen, starting backwards, what would I be doing? I'd be playing golf. You know, uh, and who am I? So, with Joseph, I am the founder of KYC 2020. I describe myself as a tech entrepreneur, engineer, product guy. And as it relates to KYC 2020, I run the business, but focus most of my time on the product side, while Joseph focuses on business development and sales for us. And yeah, I'm looking forward to telling you guys a little bit about how we're going to get you all to play golf because we're solving the problem with our product, Decision IQ.
Perfect. Everyone throw in your handicap now. We'll see. Everyone throw their handicap in the chat and we'll start comparing. Um, uh, Joseph, thanks so much for taking us through that because I think it's really important. Although many of us have seen it, I think a lot of people would have been happy with those 9 matches, but it's great to see how you use the tool to get down to like 1 or 1 to 4 matches. But let's get into this. What do we do? Like, are there tuning consideration when we're using fuzzy? I want to talk to you, Joseph, and then maybe we can go to Karen from more of the customer side, and she can talk to what are the considerations when we're doing these type of searches.
Oh, great question, Stephen. Yes, tuning is probably one of the most important parts of fuzzy logic screening. Um, the, the, the vast majority of the results that come back as false positives can be tuned out, but you're still left with at least anywhere from 25 to 25% that you still have to go through. And it's all because of these name variants. So when we looked at it from a problem perspective, and I think Rajeev can talk about this a little bit more later on, is the there are different types of ways to do that. You can screen it by the number or percentages of words. You can screen it based on whether you want liberal or restrictive searches. You can screen it based on all kinds of other different things. But the trick is to be able to rely on the tool as much as you can and then tune out the noise. And really the tool itself has to get to that point. No matter how many tweaking tools or options you give it, you're always going to get a lot of stuff out of there. And so we've taken it a step beyond and looked at it from a human perspective. How do humans filter out those things? And that's where you start looking at phonetics and name variants and transliterations and those kind of things. I'm not a guru at that. I have to attribute that all to Rajeev because him and the team have done a wonderful job of doing that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. Karen, from your side, what are some of the tuning considerations? And I want to know, are there companies that try to skirt around some of these thresholds and tune it so it's way low, a lot less results? And have they been caught doing that by the regulators? Like, what's the regulator stance? Because now this is more of there's not going to be a standard number. This is more broad across the industry, especially depending on the type of products and services that the company offers. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, there's a bunch there to dig into actually. So I'd say to go to have people tuned it in a a way that lets them off the hook. 100%. Have they been caught? Also 100%. We had a big case out of the U.S. where and I won't name the bank partially because I don't 100% recall which bank it was. I have an idea who it was, but they've also been in other trouble. So I had a hard time trying to find and dig that one up. But uh, they were fined very specifically for tuning their system to the number of employees hours that they had available, as opposed to tuning their system to catch things and hiring the number of employees they needed to clear those. They pretty much said, well, we have 4 guys, so we're going to tune our system so that it's 4 guys worth full-time work to clear those. That's not how that works. That's not how that's supposed to work. You really have to make sure that you're people who get more into model management will hear things like above the line and below the line tuning, and so making sure that what's coming up above the line, what's coming up as your false positive, potential true positives, are the whole population of true positives, and so you have to kind of keep adjusting where your fuzzy logic is, where things are hitting, how well your system is performing. It has to be a continual process of tuning your system. It can't be something that you just leave to every 2 years, every 5 years. It really has to, at absolute minimum, be an annual process to make sure that you're looking at the results you're getting and are happy with the results you're getting, and do some testing on it to make sure you're not missing anything. Because again, when the regulators come in, they're going to come in, if you're a pretty good, in my case, bank, 5 years, they're going to come in and do a review. And if they catch stuff at 5 years and go, you really should have caught this for the last 5 years, we're going to start coming in, every 6 months and checking up on you. Well, now you need to hire 7 more guys just to keep up with the regulatory requests that are going to keep coming, as well as doing your remediation, as well as doing a minimum 5-year look back, as like all these pieces start to come to the forefront, just by having your logic wrong or not documenting well how your logic works. And I think that there was actually, I saw in when Joseph did scroll down the PDF he had up, there was a what percent of fuzzy was he looking at for the logic, and it was at 75%, which some people may say is low. It is that like 80% might work better for your bank, because that okay, 90% of our guys are named Muhammad, and it's just a vowel somewhere or a double M somewhere that's going to change, that's going to shift that logic. So we don't need to look at 75%. 80% is going to catch all of the people within our customer base. So yeah, you have to be cognizant of when you're doing your tuning of things like, who is your customer base? What kind of names do they get? As I said, I work for Bank of China. Chinese characters are not, Latin-based characters. They translate differently. And then there is the fact that many Chinese people also use an English name because we butcher the pronunciation of their names. Sadly, working on it. But
and there's also and there's also deviations that are like, if you look at Indonesian names, they have sunshine and moon, and words that are like, how did you get a name out of that?
Well, and even like I have some Japanese friends, and one of my Japanese friends name's Yoko, which you'd think, okay, 4 letters, that's pretty easy. Okay, but her name Yoko means spring breeze, as opposed to the 80 other ways that you can use kanji to spell the name Yoko, because it's 2 characters put together to one pronunciation, but all the characters are different. Are you going to screen everyone who is Yoko and get 80 hits if everyone's on a list, or are you going to look for that one character set? What makes sense for you and your customers, and how well do you know the language that you're working in? All of these pieces are really key.
Karen, you spoke about that company that tried to, tune to the amount of employees they had. I think that's a great segue into what differences have you seen maybe from, I know you're big in the MSB community. Have you seen from maybe traditional MSBs or even some of the virtual asset service providers that don't have a huge amount of resources and people to kind of go through these false positives versus some of the larger financial institutions and bigger banks around the world? Have you seen many differences on how they approach this conundrum?
Well, if we're talking MSBs, that's more towards Joseph, I think. But I can talk a little bit more about like the small FIs, the small banks, because I've worked with a lot where the team in Toronto is like 100 people, of which 3 are compliance, of which 7 are compliance, and that gets really tricky when you have it. Like, one of my first jobs every day right now for my bank is to go in and check the overnight runs, because one of the big problems I'd say for banks is that the regulators expect all banks to be able to function at the level, at minimum, of the you know second tier. So not quite the big 5, but whoever's chasing the big 5, you're expected to bring yourself up to that standard. So for example, at absolute minimum, to meet your reporting standards, you have to screen your entire customer base weekly. Most banks have taken it to the point where it's like daily,
Right.
because we can't do weekly. So do you have one guy who's hitting all the time on the same list daily, and you're clearing the same guy all the
So,
time? Do you
so,
whitelist him?
so yeah, we've seen it. We've seen that with some of the second tier banks, and
Yeah.
one of the features we have is flag. So once you've already cleared it, then when it comes back, you're like, okay, you could ignore all those ones and just see the new hits, right? But again, it's like the small MSBs too. They're just using exact match searching. They're not even doing fuzzy right now, and it's going to be a challenge because as you see more of these spelling mistakes and more regulators realizing these spelling mistakes, they're pushing hard to some of these guys to get to fuzzy.
And more criminals using the spelling mistakes. Let's remember that the point of doing this is to catch people trying to violate sanctions and try and work their way around the system. So if they realize that if they add an extra D, to their last name, that they don't get caught, and Anderson is spelt with 2 Ds for some reason, who might argue, that's what's on his official document. So I'm just screening that name and it's a different guy, right?
Stephen, you're going to get into solutions and discussions of those later on, but on this point, Karen, that you brought up, the persistent ongoing monitoring.
Mhm.
Since we got in the business 5, 6 years ago. I find that to be the most inefficient, just a horrible process. You talk to banks and you're scratching your head. You're saying, okay, you're right. It's like Sisyphus, the guy who takes a rock up the mountain every day and he rolls back down. And what are they doing? They're rescanning on the same list or the change list every single day, right?
Yeah, you're expected to scan on the delta, which is any changes to the list. You're expected
But,
by the regulators to do that.
but the thing about it though, even when they scan on the delta, they don't use additional intelligence. So if you got a list, if your customer list is, so the way we approach this thing is, we call our system AUM, OM, it's active utilitarian monitoring. And I believe since we've got our own CAMLO, it's been vetted, it's compliant. But what we do is we look at the change delta of the list, and then we reverse the process. So instead of taking the 10 million names and screening each one through the delta, we take the delta. So for example, if the list only changed, the sanction list only changed by 2 names, we'll take a look and do a fuzzy search on our customer list to identify what customers are perhaps impacted by the change in the sanction list. So I'm saying that the world has to move towards more intelligent ways to do even the recurring tasks of ongoing monitoring to save human time.
Yeah,
That,
and I'd definitely agree with that, and I think I'd also add, if you are a CAMLO or anyone in the senior kind of decision-making chain, you should be looking at your system and saying, are we still using the same system today that we were using 5 years ago? Has
correct.
that system changed and updated, or are we just throwing kind of good money after bad, because there haven't been any updates, there haven't been any changes? Are we going with the biggest vendor because they're the biggest vendor, or because we're getting value out of it? And those are kind of, and I'm, to be very clear, I'm not affiliated in any way with KYC 2020, but this is something that everyone should be looking at, kind of in addition to the tuning. Have you tuned your vendors? Have you really taken that look?
Sharon, I'm completely unbiased, and my affiliation with KYC 2020 is very soft.
What I would want to know though, like we see a lot of, especially in the virtual asset space, they love the automation, they love the solutions, they love the AI. But what we've also seen, especially with like things like identity verification, if there's a flaw in the system, it also becomes difficult to detect because of the reduced human touch points. How do you combat that with, let's just say, KYC 2020 and a tool that almost looks very hands-free or that has less human input, Joseph and Rajeev? I'm curious to see how do you handle that? Where do you detect the flaws if there is one?
So let me take that, Stephen. When we first started with our, decisioning system, right? It all started with a white paper about 3 years ago that I published. And the idea was just like the fraud systems in the 1990s. I don't know if anybody here knows about fraud. Fraud used to be, prone to very high false positive, a lot of human touch points. The customer experience suffered. You're out there, purchasing something for your client, and all of a sudden you get a call from American Express, something's denied. And those fraud systems have evolved, and the use of AI, and they've become more automated, right? Same thing was the logic that we deployed, that eventually traditional screening, which is what we started with, is going to have to merge into more automated decision making. And Stephen, it's not going to become 100% hands-free, right? But it has to become better in terms of if you're using fuzzy, which is a conundrum, that the conundrum is, there's a problem if you do, and there's a problem if you don't, right? So when we designed our decision system, our goal was it had to have some pillars that address the problems that, for example, you just brought up. First and the foremost was there were decision systems out there, but most of them were black boxes, right? So we will not be the first ones to talk about decisioning technology, Stephen, right? But a black box is not something that you can sell to an auditor. That I gave a decision, I cleared all the false positives, and the decision is this customer is pass, right? The auditor wants to see, and the customer today wants to see a transparent, auditable system. So our first pillar was it had to be auditable. So we came up with something which Joseph, when he showed that PDF, we call that our proof of work or proof of decision file. So that's the fundamental tenet behind our decision system, is that a decision basically means that you ran traditional screening, Stephen, and it resulted in false positives. So if Joseph, you were to show all those false positives in that PDF, right? These are all these false positives that were Creen, there's a Creen limited and so forth. How did you clear those? And in this PDF, we present what name variants we cleared, how we matched, what was the logic that was used. So Stephen, the fact that it's hands-free, it's really hands-free only at the time of the real-time decision-making. As you know, most companies are moving towards faster decision-making, faster onboarding, faster merchant onboarding, faster customer onboarding. And to achieve that, you need systems that are fast, they're automated, and then they can be reviewed later on. So in our system, our decisioning system is pretty simple. It comes back with either a pass, fail, verify. And what that basically means, that pass means that we didn't find any hits, or we found false positive hits that were all cleared. Fail means that we found hits and we could not clear some of them. And verify basically means that the AI or the intelligence that we've got built in could not discern something, right? There's Rajeev Bahri, and we found a Rajesh Bahri, right? But that's an example of something that now you've got to have a human go and review. But also, Stephen, as Karen was saying, that you're not going to trust systems 100%. So you're going to have a process later on that needs to review these decisions, or need to evaluate, are the decisions on an ongoing basis meeting your risk profile? So it's not hands-free completely, but it's hands-free at runtime, at the time of speed that you need. And then it's got built-in auditability so that eventually you can go back and audit yourself. Or if your auditor comes in, you say, hey, look, we made this decision, it was wrong, but here's the proof of work that we used, right?
I like that. I like that. Karen, I want to go to you because, you know, Rajeev brought up a really great point about, you know, the customer onboarding process. We're seeing challenger banks, we're seeing cryptocurrency companies, Bitcoin ATMs. They don't have the, you know, like you go to TD Bank and it's like 16 days just for them to run a loan application. So talk about, how do you balance the kind of onboarding process, knowing that now you have a lot more competition that might be deemed to have to follow some of the same regulations, but they've also seemed to find a couple loopholes in some of the guidance from FinTrack and other FIUs. How do you balance your customer onboarding process with the burdensome process of going through name screening?
So I think I would kind of challenge that they found loopholes. I think in general they haven't. What they have is a newer, more agile system than, again, the big five banks are still running Fortran, and they're still running some really old systems
COBOL.
and some really, yeah, COBOL, some of the really old programming languages that people here won't even, you know, recognize because it's so ancient. Some people might, but so they have a more agile system. They have a more agile data warehouse. Knowing where your data is and how to use it is key for a lot of these systems. Have you put all your names in one place and all of the like account number and date of birth in another? Like, are they all in one place that you can easily get them into the system to run? Can be one of the big challenges, to be honest, because if you were one of the big five banks and you built your system organically over decades, you haven't designed it to talk to each other. You've just bolted on a new product here and a new service here, and it's not in any way cohesive. So a lot of people have had to do the work of putting together and building up, you know, a data warehouse of some sort that has all of the like customer data properly together and properly linked, so you can get to it and deal with it, get it through the screening systems, know what you have. Again, it's one of the big benefits of some of the smaller entities is that they can just say, here is all of our stuff, we're going to run everything against this right here, and it's a lot easier for them to use. One of the things that they're going to find trickier, especially when you mention things like blockchain and stuff, some of these people have interesting interpretations based on reading the guidelines that don't actually line up with the way that the regulators enforce the guidance. There is an interesting trick in Canada where slowly the regulatory focus shifts as to how they want to enforce things, and then they rewrite the guidance to match what they're currently doing. But you had 5 years of shift in the middle there. Again, as I said, OSFI, you know, wanted you to make sure you were running your lists once a week. Well, everyone has kind of been encouraged towards daily. So I'm betting that, you know, OSFI guidance was going to be daily until OSFI FinTrack had their kind of internecine discussion.
Karen, you brought up such a good point about housing all the data. I want to go to Joseph and to Rajeev on this point. With privacy, data retention concerns being a huge deal for organizations, especially now that we're in pandemic, when we have a lot more ransomware is one of the leading kind of frauds that are taking place. Joseph, how can people be assured that their customer information is safe, that they're actually running through these systems, and that, you know, a lot of these solutions aren't honeypots for hackers to get access to their customer database?
Stephen, let me also add one thing. I know Joseph's got like, hey, he's going to defer.
Go ahead, Rajeev.
So, as a system, our background, Joseph and I, our both backgrounds are PCI compliance. We come from payments. So, you know, with KYC 2020, right from the get-go, some of the thoughts that we had was encrypted databases that concern, like GDPR. You know, privacy was a concern from the get-go. So making sure that you take a name, even though it's not required, by the way, Stephen, because, you know, you're not taking, typical screening systems are taking what information is a cloud-based, you know, screening system taking? It's taking a name, maybe an ID. Usually IDs are not used for searching because they're very limiting. You know, they can be used for clearing false positives, but they can't be used really as well as just a name, address. So in that case, the information that we take is limited, but we decided when we take that information, we encrypt it. So we maintain in our systems, for example, I don't know whether other screening systems do this, Joseph, you might know that, but we decided to make sure that right from the get-go, we got to get towards the internet, right? And that includes encrypting the database. And if you don't mind, I want to go back to something that's very interesting that Karen said. Karen, when you were talking about technology of existing banks, that's a very solid point. A lot, in a lot of cases, uh, the speed of regulation is also limited by what these big banks and the lobbies that they say, look, we can't catch up to what you want to do. So the regulators also want to be here, but they're here, right? So for example, as you know well, Karen, rule-based systems are not they've been around for a while. So what are these banks doing? They've got their old systems. They write rules, these very archaic rules that over time they say, okay, well, if you have CITI, don't do a hit, but not the modern AI-based rules, which are, how do you solve this conundrum? The conundrum is solved by having the more intelligent ways that when do you use 75%? When do you use 50% fuzzy? Should that be static or should that an AI-based decision decide that? What's the difference, Stephen, for example, between a name search and entity search? So there's something, for example, that we use, right? If you take a look at an entity, we divide an entity out into its constituent parts. A typical entity is a business type, limited, corp, INC, whatever it might be. That should have a different weight. The second part is a functional aspect of a business, pizza company, car wash, salon, whatever it might be, cannabis, that word, we should be able to recognize that this part of the business is a functional description. And then there's a unique part, like for example, Joe's Auto Wash Limited. Well, if I'm searching for that, right, and I come up with Moe's Beauty Shop Limited, right, I shouldn't hit on that. I should not give that as a false positive because the business type is different. Or even Joe's Auto Shop Limited or Corp. Maybe the point that I'm trying to make here is depending on how you break the name, how you look at the different types, when to use fuzzy, what part of fuzzy to use, that's what allows some of the conundrum to be solved, right? And those are modern day technologies. So a lot of these banks, as Karen, you said, are stuck with the fact that yes, they've got rule-based systems that they can call decision systems, but they're really not decision systems. They're just rules, right?
That's awesome. I think the entity point is huge, right? I think, Karen, do you have any stories before we go to Joseph? Do you have any
Yeah,
stories about?
I
Give us
definitely,
one
as I
story and
said,
that the people can relate to.
So, and anyone who's doing screening, one of my least favorite things to hit up is when we open a customer that is ABC Real Estate Trust Limited, because the number of sanctioned entities that are XYZ Real Estate Trust Limited, well, as he just said, even if you have, a strong system, it's a real estate trust. It's a limited corporation, so the only difference is in that name piece, but everything else is going to match. So especially if the words Real Estate Trust Limited are long and it's Karen's Real Estate Trust Limited versus, a sanctioned entity in Ukraine that's calling themselves UKAY. So okay, we have two common letters there in the bit that's actually different. So that's a 98% hit. That they have nothing in common. The countries are different, the entities are different, the controllers are different, and I can see a lot of that because I have all the KYC for my customer. So I know they're located in Canada. The beneficial ownership is located in Canada. They're not a Ukrainian entity, but it's going to hit every time. And then you get the question of, well, you can flag that as okay. You can maybe whitelist that. Well, but how often do you review your whitelist? Because under the regulatory guidance that we get as banks, you need to be screening the whole list at least weekly. So your whitelist will clear it for a week.
That's
and
awesome.
Then you're back to the beginning again with, potential real estate trust to clear up.
What I see here is that the participants are like increasing by 10 every 10 minutes. Like people are calling their friends right now. Like, you got to hear this. You know, we've been through this every day. People are telling their friends, like, jump on
Yeah,
the call now.
and it's definitely something I know everyone experiences. It again, like other things are things like common names for individuals, like John Paul. The number of Catholic countries that have, Andrew John Paul Smith. Okay, so Andrew and Smith. So now Andrew or Andre John Paul, Gotti, let's whoever. Are they going to match because you have enough of the names that are the same? Because again, the more letters you put in, the easier it is to bump that percentage with uh, your rules and your
Right.
logic.
You
So
might even
it's
get some
tricky.
dancehall reggae singers in there too, in some of that fuzzy logic. Joseph, to you, there's actually a question from the crowd. Abdullah and Nishant, keep up with your questions. They're all being captured here, and we're hoping to get through a couple of them. And for everyone in the chat that's just keeping it alive, we really appreciate you. Joseph, this is going to be a two-part question. Is there a system that is smart enough to show that a potential negative media does not apply to your client based on the date of the news and the client's age not matching?
So wow, that's an interesting question and a very complicated one. We're when we look at it, there are a lot of pieces to that, and one of the biggest pieces is being able to create like a persona, a profile on a person's name, so that you can actually start matching up all the other attributions around different sanctions, around adverse media, around the PEP lists and the criminal lists. And so as time goes on, and we've seen this with our system, you start trying to build these relationships and start creating what's a likely hit or an unlikely hit. And so we're actually in the process of now that we've got the decisioning system, of taking that same process and applying it to adverse media. Have I seen it anywhere else? Not in the three compliance programs that I have to manage, and I, as a consultant, I'm also a consultant. I have to remain agnostic, so I leave it up to the customer. I give them the matrix, tell them what they want, but usually they end up going with, well, nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM, right? So it's the same thing with screening solutions. So it's a challenge there, but it is coming and it's starting to happen. I've seen some of the systems do similar things that we're doing, but it's not there yet. It's really hard. And I think I saw it in one of the chats. Somebody was 24 years old in 2016. They come to your system. They're 30 years old now. The article said 24. Is there a way to match that to say, hey, this might be the same person because he's now 30 years old? It is coming, and I know we're looking at doing that with the new persona database, and other systems are starting to recognize that, but it's still a little ways off, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure you go to all those meetings with that agnostic t-shirt on as well. uh, you know what's funny? I'm not gonna let you guys off the hook. You guys are doing a great job of talking about the industry in a whole. But one thing I know by being approached from several different AI companies is everyone has the same motto: we really do AI, but the rest of the companies really aren't doing AI. Can you either everyone's doing AI or nobody's doing AI? Can you talk about that, Joseph? Why these companies are saying that, and like what's real AI versus not real AI? Because I think that'll be helpful for the audience as well.
So when it comes to the AI, real or not, I think Rajeev is better positioned for that because he works with the product team and our data. So we actually hired a doctor, data scientist a couple of years ago, Shams, and he's doing a wonderful job on that. But I think AI is there's two sides of it. There's the you set up the initial rules, and then eventually you start building in the intelligence based on the amount of data that you're getting and how you process it and all that other stuff. But I think that's a Rajeev question that would probably be
Perfect.
better answered.
Rajeev, I saw you were on mute. I know you jumped off specifically for this question. I'd love to hear from you.
Right. Stephen, that's a very good question, right? And I know we're all over 21, so I can say there's a lot of bullshit in the use of the word AI. And there are a lot of rule-based systems masquerading as AI. And I would also say to you that we ourselves have to struggle with the fact that sometimes even AI doesn't work, right? And that's why there's the whole learning aspect to it. Now, so I don't think AI is there when it comes to name screening, because even the AI says, look, there's a conundrum here, right? Uh, there's a learning aspect to this whole thing, right? So you could do learning through machine learning, ongoing learning that takes place. So we deploy some of that. And then you also have the constant human review, as Karen, you were talking about as well. You have to have a process built in that you're continuously reviewing decisions. So to give you an example, Stephen, in terms of our use of AI, here's an example of AI, right? Let's take a India-specific name. Let's take my name, Rajeev Bahri, right? If you do a 75 or 50% fuzzy search on Rajeev Bahri, you're going to get all sorts of hits. You're going to get Rajeshes, Rajeevs, every phonetic match, name variant match, uh, and it's probably going to be about 200 names you got to go through, right? A lot of that stuff can be cleared away with thinking like this. I'll just give you one example since we have limited time. That let's say I get a hit on Rajesh Ohri, all right? Your AI system has to be able to make an intelligent decision like the following: that Rajiv and Rajesh are actually two different names in India. Okay, so that cannot be a typo or a mismatch because those are two different names. And now you look at the word Ohri and Bahari, right? In that case, the AI has to decide that, look, Ohri also, based on my learning and whatever rule systems that you've got, is also a common full name in India. And based on that, it is very highly likely that Rajesh Ohri is not a typo or phonetic mismatch, because a human, and if somebody from India would not confuse a Rajiv Bahri and a Rajesh Ohri, and they would use that to clear that. That's the kind of intelligence I am talking about when I speak about AI. The typical rule-based systems, Karen, that we're used to in the past is that one character trans to there are a lot of different algos out there, right? The transposing of a letter, the phonetic matching, um, partial word, what percentage. Elasticsearch, for example, is a tool that most people use. Will give you a percentage match and will give you a score, right? And then you are going to make a decision in your system based on that score. Is a score high enough for me to look at, or is the score low enough? Humans don't think like that, right? Humans don't think like a score. They use additional logic and thinking, and that is what we're deploying, right? And but Stephen, I will tell you, as a solution provider, we're not there yet. We're getting there. We're choosing to use the right technology and the right approach. We'll get there. But I would say that we're still about a year, 2 years away, maybe even 3 years away from real AI in this business. And that is why, Stephen, it is very important to have one of the most important pillars in your decision system, which is auditability. So I say this again: if there is a decision system out there that does not tell you how it made a decision, it's garbage. Why? It's because if somebody says to you that, oh, look, this is very proprietary. This is proprietary. Well, proprietary may have worked back in the 80s because you had such great science, but today I want to know how your system made the decision so that I can go in and do the assessment myself whether I want to deploy the system.
And if I can jump in on the end of that, that is 100% what the regulators are looking for. That's 100% what your risk team should be looking for. If you can't look inside the box, don't use the box. Like it's not there. And I mean, all of us at this point have heard all the stories about AI where it's just like any computer system, it's garbage in, garbage out. Like the Amazon system that was trained for hiring, that decided that no women could be successful as computer programmers because the training set they'd been given was all of the computer programmers, and there weren't any women there, so they just tossed out any resume that was from a woman right away, didn't even consider them for an interview, right? So you have to be really careful about how you're training AIs, what you're doing, like how quickly you think you can stand up an AI. And again, all of that has to be able to be audited, because if you can't, then it's no good. Again, for a bank, for a regulated entity, it's
Can I throw something else in there? One of the other things that I find is also the data itself.
yeah.
A lot of companies don't spend time, and this is one of the things I think I push the team a lot, and Rajeev pushes the team a lot, is you got to have clean data, right? So when I get results, a lot of the times it says, oh, this person was on a criminal list. Okay, you go to the link and they give you the link, and it's like, but they're no longer there. Oh, but they were there once. How do you know that? How do I know that? Where can I get the proof? Oh, we don't have that. We just tell you that that was one of the hits that we had, one of these. And I'm like, how am I supposed to tell the regulator when they come and say, did you check that link? And I'll say the link was empty. Okay, well, why is your provider providing you an empty link? Right. So a lot of the times the data itself is also corrupt. And so you need to also, if you're going to audit the AI and everything else, you also have to audit the data, and you have to check it, and you have to check it and check it and check it, because things change, and they change fast in this stuff.
Well,
Very
and
good.
that
Yeah.
goes back even to like what you were saying and what people were asking about, negative news. Negative news is not a conviction. Negative news is not an arrest. Even negative news is someone with a news camera and a news organization who's looking at you. They do not publish that you were not charged. They publish that there were police at your house, right? So what can I do with that information? I mean, if there's a following, like I can take that on board as something to consider, but that's not a sanction, that's not a violation, that's not even something that would necessarily, increase your customer risk rating score. It should be something you consider closer on the fraud side a lot of the time. But you have to be really careful about what you are taking this information in, where and why you're taking it in from, and how you are using it for an output. And those links have to always be there to make sure that something makes sense.
Right.
It goes back to those indicators, right? Like a negative news hit, when I look at it, it's like, okay, that's one hit. Does that person have other attributes? Does that person
Yeah.
show me that they're potentially a fraudster or a criminal or on a sanction list? But negative news by itself should not warrant offboarding or de-risking, and sometimes those engines are just so tuned that say, oh, you got a hit, yeah, it looks good,
Yep.
you're offboarded, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, I see in the chat someone really quickly brought up the Panama Papers, and my response there would be the Panama Papers gives you a reason to go back and look at your own customers and do your own investigation as to whether or not you think the customer had done tax evasion through your entity. It doesn't necessarily, again, increase the customer's risk score. It means that, oh no, you should really do a scrub, see who shows up, and then do detailed investigation of those entities, or individuals who showed up, on an ongoing basis. And the bank that I worked at the time that those came out set up a team to go through, see who hit, see what we had, and do manual investigations. But
Yeah, and one
anyways.
thing I was going to add to that is, as Joseph was saying, Joseph, takes a big lead for us in terms of data. Um, when we first started out as well, the idea was, if people on this panel know, when Elasticsearch as a technology was put forth, which is what Google, Amazon, and all these guys use, and that's why when you go to Google, you can get, you type something in, and like it's amazingly how it finds what you were looking for, even though you typed it wrong, and then you have 60 million, hits, right? That you have to, and they're ranked in a certain order. The point that I'm trying to make was that, you dealt with dirty data. And Elasticsearch allowed you to say, you know what, we are aggregating. So what we do at KYC 2020 is we aggregate thousands and thousands of sites. Our bots go in, aggregate that data, bring it into a center. We kept it dirty. But this is 4 years ago, because Elasticsearch solved that problem. Over time, we decided that, you know what, that's not good enough. We've got to go back actually to older technologies, almost like relational databases, to get away from big data, go back to relational data, to be able to have relationships across, so cross list relationships. Somebody on sanctions, somebody on news. Another problem that I think, I'm sure that you guys have come across, a false positive conundrum is that you deal with a lot of duplicates, right, Karen? I
Yep.
mean, Because you're like, my God, man, I've got 240 hits. Frankly, of the 240 hits, 200 probably are duplicates. But deduplicating data. So Joseph, you're spot on. Before you get onto screening technologies or even decisioning technologies, better make sure your data is properly structured, cross-mapped, deduplicated, uh, and relational in a sense, so that you are not building those relationships yourself. The human is not doing that when the data should have already done that.
And if I can jump in there as well, from the consumer side, as you know, the entity who might be using the system. So it's very important that you guys do that. It's very important that we do that. Like the number of times that people go back and look at our own customer data and make sure that it's clean is not frequent enough in my experience. We need to go in and make sure, like even basic things like, okay, you got the list of board of directors when the customer was onboarded, and yeah, you did a customer review at 2 years, but did you update and change in the system all the boards of director members? Because one of them is now hitting as a PEP. And do you want that PEP flag applied to your customer when actually he left as a director 3 years ago, which is why he now took the position where he can be a PEP because he had to like get out of industry to move into the political sphere. All of those are key questions. And again, dirty data is just going to make a lot of noise, and then you're going to have to wade through the noise, unfortunately.
Karen, I want to talk to you specifically because a lot of questions, even yesterday on an AMA, where everyone's fascinated by what Rajeev and Joseph and AI is doing. But a lot of the people on this call are investigators or working in the compliance department. What does the future hold for their job security? What are they going to need to upskill? I want to go to you, and then maybe Joseph can add in his insights, especially from the cryptocurrency sphere.
Yeah, so if you're looking for how to step up from being an investigator specific to list screening, the kind of the next sideways step a little bit is to see if you can take some of that knowledge into STR or SIR screening for suspicious transactions, because you've actually developed through the list screening a fair amount of skill in determining what is and what is not really useful to look at. And so I think that that's probably a really good direction. And a lot of time it's just lateral within the FIU anyways, at your institution. But if you really want to take kind of the next step upwards in your career, the thing to start to look at and consider is, how are these systems working together? Because a lot of the time, and I think you can probably tell from some of the things I said, I know computers pretty well and I love computers, but a lot of the time the people who are designing the computers don't understand the user, and the user is very bad at, speaking to the computer team and saying, this is what I need. There's a lot of, this is what I wish the outcome would be, as opposed to, here's the data set that we need to work with to kind of run magic here to get to the outcome. So being able to talk through that process within your risk and compliance teams will be really helpful to your organization, and I think to your growth, because it's going to get more complex over time. There's going to be more, AI or pseudo AI. Can you spot the difference? Do you know, can you help your team figure out, we can't actually look inside this box, we can't use this box, as we said before. So those I think are two things to keep front of mind. How much do you understand, and are you looking at what kind of tuning does the list need? Like what kind of roadblocks do you keep running into, as far as, why am I looking at this one again? We cleared it last time, it's not really a hit, what am I looking at? Okay, can you help your tuning team? Can you start writing write some notes down for them, get into a couple of conversations and say, hey, we keep running into this, tuning's coming up in another month or two, can we like add some of these in, and you might get invited onto some of the committees and assigned
Instead of just complaining about all
coerced
the
onto, which in a larger organization will give you the face time that
Right.
you need to start getting acknowledgement and getting careers moving in an upward direction. So talk with your IT team, talk with whoever's responsible for tuning, talk with your risk group, and see what you can do.
Great. Joseph, I want to go to you. Is KYC 2020 going to put people out of jobs, or are they going to make them able to do more of their job because they're not spending so much time manually name screening and going through all the false positives?
The way the lists are growing, I don't think that job will ever be eliminated. We keep getting more Panama Papers and sanctions lists and stuff like that. I go through tuning exercises all the time with the other products, including KYC 2020. I think one of the most critical ones is focus on which data you really want to look at. For example, the OFAC list is probably one of the most global lists and has all kinds of stuff in there. The UN list mirrors it a lot, but there's some exceptions. And then when you start getting into the other G30, G37, G39, whatever FATF is at now, you start saying, well, wait a second, Canada's list is the same. EU's list is the same. All these different countries start mirroring the OFAC or mirroring the UN list. So why do you need that list in there 20 times? So a lot of the times I'll tune it to say, okay, we're in Canada, we deal with Canadians. I just want the 5 eyes. I just want these lists. And this way it also reduces your false positives. That's number one. Number two, I think as far as eliminating jobs, no. If you're actually a good screener, it's a great rabbit hole tool. It's a great tool to go and say, this thing said it's a financial services hot zone. What does that mean? Let me go investigate it a little bit, right? And then you say, oh wow, and it opens your eyes. Or this person here is part of some Al Qaeda Bitcoin terrorist group, right? And they're accepting donations. And so you go down this rabbit hole, and then you find this big, huge Department of Justice document that talks about how they found them, where did they get all the crypto addresses, all this stuff. So I still do that sometimes these days. When I see something very interesting, I'll go down a rabbit hole and I'll start reading. Like I read a 150-page DOJ document just because I wanted to understand how it worked. And then it led to me start thinking, okay, well, we got this other client who was an adverse media. And I'm like, wait a second, let me see if he's got a donation page somewhere. So I start looking. Sure enough, bingo, I find a donation page. It's got him in there. All the donations are anonymous. I'm like, what's going on here? Right? So it starts triggering all kinds of ideas. So it's not a waste of time job, and it's a great job to learn and get down rabbit holes as long as you got good data. If you have to filter out 200 fuzzy logics for Karen Creen, that's a waste of time.
We have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to ask one question, and I'm going to go to Rajeev to kind of end us off maybe from a product side. So Joseph, you mentioned like specifically Canada. If you're in Canada, many of our audience members are. Do the recent proposals and the proposal changes to the proposals around identity verification, PEP requirements, we've seen future beneficial owner registries coming in Canada. Does that have any effect on the sanctions screening or on your workflow?
Not really. The only challenge right now is the VAS with the travel rule. I think that's the biggest challenge when it comes to identifying the senders, because part of the rule says you have to verify that, get the information on the sender. So there's two sides of it. So you have to plug into some system that replicates Swift with that beneficial ownership information, the conductor information, all that stuff there. And right now, it's not there. So there's a big challenge, and the regulators recognize that, just like Karen said earlier on. They want you here, but they start you here. And so they slowly chip away to get you to that level. And I think that'll happen over the next couple of years here in Canada, and other countries as well, but it's going to take time.
Karen, do you want to give us 2 minutes about, I know we talked about on our pre-call this week about, some of the changes that are happening immediately. June is kind of a deadline for a lot of the requirements. Does that change your workflow? Does that need more resources, or is that just fine tuning across both your maybe local organization and your global parent companies?
If all of the changes were actually happening June 1st, it would have helped. But unfortunately, FINTRAC's, speaking of making sure your systems stay modernized, FINTRAC systems can't keep up with some of the changes. One of the changes they are implementing, though, is, as similar to the travel rule. They're changing the first in last out reporting requirement effective June 1st, and so that's been a bit of a headache, I think, for the whole industry. And I don't think the industry is actually going to be on time for that in a large way. Systems take a lot longer to change than I think FinTrack and finance were prepared for. So there's that's going to lead to under and over reporting on multiple fronts. But I think that Joseph's right that some of the changes are they're great to have, but currently technically not possible to have, especially based on things like even things like if you're collecting information from someone sending information from Hong Kong to Canada, you don't necessarily get an address. I don't know if you have tried to screen Hong Kong addresses. They are all this long. They are very difficult to put into a Swift message. And so they provide their country ID, which under Hong Kong law is fine. That's totally acceptable. And we get it and we're like, but where's the address? Because under Canadian rules, we kind of need your address. Hopefully the modernization of the Swift message format, the change from the MT 103 to the new standard that's in a year or two, I think.
ISO 20022.
Yeah, the 20022 will ameliorate some of that, and we're kind of hopeful. And we're also hopeful that the FinTrack reporting requirements don't try and pre-guess what that looks like, that they come later. And I think currently they've told us they're going to wait on that, which is good, because again, the industry doesn't want to build 3 times. That's one of the biggest problems we've had right now, is dealing with the fact that the regulators are trying to get out ahead of things that they should be. They keep putting the cart before the horse, and it means that we're having to build systems 2-3 times to even keep up with our own reporting requirements. So that doesn't really impact the false positive or the sanction screen. Well, it kind of impacts the sanction screening, but it's a big drain and a big delay on and kind of wasted money and resources, to be honest, on our IT team and our compliance team, who has to keep trying to translate the requirements back and forth.
Perfect. Rajeev, I'm going to end with you, just because you were so transparent about, AI not being 100% there and working towards it. I actually want to kind of reach out to you and discuss decision IQ. Like, you have a product, we've seen it in action. I know a lot of people are probably like, hey, I could use something that produces even if it's a fail, I'll take that one match versus the 200. What are the similarities to your products to others that you may have seen in the market? And what do you believe is your true competitive advantage when it comes to your product, and what stands out to you the most, and what should stand out to the people that are using it?
So, Stephen, thanks. I was going to say that, look, 3-4 years ago, when we ventured down the path of Decision IQ, I was at the IMTC conference with Joseph, I believe. I spoke to some of our young users, that we were going to convert from whatever they were using. And you look like a Top Gun fan. And they had a need for speed, Stephen. For them, compliance was a hurdle, or big, huge speed bump to their, to business, right? And I realized that the terminology had to change, the philosophy had to change. So I would like to think that we're the first ones using the word decisioning, because it's not in the dictionary. So, we're trying to go from sanction screening to sanction decisioning. The problem is, if we use that word by itself, we get no hits on our website, because nobody's searching for sanction decisioning. I'd like to think that in 2-3 years, it's going to be sanction decisioning. Look, AI is just one of the technologies. The philosophy has to change. That we're not screening, and then the humans are going to go in and do this job of filtering out garbage. And I want to go back to the previous question that you asked about, are we taking away jobs? No, we're getting people to move up to the next level of jobs. I think it's very important. Most people on this panel today, as well as the audience, when they look at their jobs and they have to screen garbage, that's not a fun job, right? And I think the evolution is going to be that the same folks are going to move up the ladder in terms of tuning these systems, right? because tuning is still going to be required depending on risk-based approach of your bank. Testing these systems, evaluating, and auditing these systems, being a part in developing these systems. So, like for example, ourselves, we're looking for people, but I'm looking for very specific industry folks to hire, bring on board who understand what screening is, and then they almost become these pseudo programmers for us because they lend us their thinking. So Stephen, have I seen others out there? Uh, it would be wrong for me as a business to say that I haven't. But to be, I'm not looking. I'm not looking. So Joseph may know, are there others out there? I believe we're one of the very few, if not the only ones, that are using the word decisioning and making sure that we get down to the fact that at runtime we give you speed and we give you decisions. Steve, a lot of banks, as Karen would know, have over the years tried to build systems to give them decisions to speed things up, right? And these decisions are based on old technology, rule-based stuff like that. So I think that technology is evolving. We're one of the very few. There should be more. The more they are, the better off everybody is. And I think we should all venture towards the technology of getting to decisioning versus just screening. Hopefully, I answered your
Perfect.
question.
No, you did. And guys, we have 100 people here. Let's start using decisioning when we go on LinkedIn. Let's turn that word viral so that they can get a little SEO going to KYC 2020. Thanks so much. And thanks for putting that out there. If you guys are listening carefully, they are looking for those people that can really help them with their products. So you can reach out to Susan. She'll make the connection definitely for sure. And thank you to all the panel members. This was really a great conversation. I felt the pain in the chat. But I also felt a little bit of relief knowing that what's here right now and what's to come for the industry, because that extra 3 to 4 hours that they could have from what some people are saying is a day or even in a week, what more could we do for our investigations with that extra time? Susan, I'll take it over to you. I know we're a little bit over, but I think everyone's been engaged. So I'll take it over to you to kind of end us off with the congratulations of the 40th Knowledge Series.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much, the panelists, for an amazing discussion and session today. So for celebrating our 40th session, we put a challenge on LinkedIn for our bingo challenge, which we had 3 front runners. That was basically the first ones who put their result in. So Radha, Sharon, and Tareen are the 3 first winners. We have the 4th winner to decide on among 5 of the people who they put their bingo sheets on LinkedIn. So I'm gonna do a draw right now. And then on top of that, we're gonna have our 5th winner, which is gonna be one of you who are gonna be among the session. So first of all, as well, that the platinum of TCAE membership is going to be rewarded for 1 year for all those winners. So congratulations and thank you for all your support. So let us go to the to my famous wheel. I'm sure that all of you know and have been in the wheel before. So we are gonna first start off with our 5 people, Abhilash, Yalini, Monica, Muhammad, and Joseph, to see that who is gonna be the winner of our 4th.
Hey, Mohammed, congrats.
That's welcome. Congratulations, Muhammad. You're our 4th winner. So that's awesome. And let's go and see that who is gonna be our winner, who is gonna be in the session as well. So Edward. I just want to make sure that Edward is in the session.
It looks like Edward Laura. It looks like, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Congratulations, Edward. That's
Edward's like, yeah, I'm here, man. Don't respin the wheel.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need to spin the wheel again. Thank you. Thank you for being in this session, and thank you everyone for joining us. Our memberships are really awesome and amazing, and we have just started that. And make sure that you visit our website to see what are the membership categories that we have. But the platinum members, they are gonna be the first ones who are gonna join the platinum lounge and the platinum membership, and you're gonna get into our exclusive membership community platform, which are amazing. So and also, you're going to get a lot of benefit from special discounts for our courses, specifically if you're a crypto enthusiast. And our deadline is on Monday, 31st. So don't forget to sign up on our Chainalysis course if in case that you're still interested. And well done to everyone to stay up all that and being with us for the 40 sessions straight. Thank you for all your support, and I hope that we see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks so much, Susan. Thanks, guys. Thanks to the
Thanks,
panel.
everybody. Thank you
Have a
for
good day,
having us.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Joseph, Karen, and Rajeev, and Stephen for all the moderation and all the great discussions. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
All right, take care, guys.
You too.